Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Well, folks, what a week it has been here in Tennessee. It appears that much of the same thing that just happened in our General Assembly is also happening in the Texas legislature as well. For the listeners outside of Texas and Tennessee, you may be wondering what I'm talking about. Well, it boils down to this. Even in supposedly supermajority Republican states, after years of the national government eroding our liberty, Uncle Sam's 50 greedy nephews, regardless of political party affiliation, have learned their lesson and are now trying to convince the people that our state government's solution to a lack of liberty is that the state government needs to, quote unquote, sell the people back their liberty, and they do it through the taxes that the people pay. The avenue by which they are doing that comes as no surprise to the regular listeners of this program, but the level of deviousness is not only quite surprising, and because it's being accomplished by so-called Republicans, the actions of these trans publicans should serve as just another example of the apathy that is right now and will continue to be the ultimate downfall of our republic. We're going to dig into some of the past public statements as well as social media postings by the trans publicans here in Tennessee who either succumb to the thug-like pressure put on them by leadership, Republican leadership, as well as pressure put on them by out-of-state billionaire-funded special interest groups. And this pressure put on the members of the General Assembly in putting a new entitlement program into place that is going to be funded by the taxpayers. Now, some of these members do not get a pass, though, because most of them folded like a cheap suit in selling out the liberty of my fellow Tennesseans to those highest bidders of special interest groups. They did that by passing a law that will force every Tennessean to pay for school vouchers. Now, keep that word in mind, vouchers, to pay for school vouchers in the state. I want to give a shout out here to Tennessee's own patriot punk, Robert Matheson, and his partner in crime, Daniel Wagner, for having me as a guest on their show Wednesday evening. It was fun picking apart the socialist bill introduced by the trans publicans for the special session that concluded Thursday evening. What did I tell you, though, folks, about one of the main reasons for our lame duck governor that identifies as a Republican? Why did he want his money and power grab to be considered in a special session? Time and transparency. Little time for debate on the merits of the bill and the shuffling of committee assignments to limit transparency. In fact, the supermajority violated its own recently passed rules package in that they allowed for voice votes in the committees instead of roll call votes. Need I remind you that the chairman of the Rules Committee of the Tennessee General Assembly is none other than spiky hair William Lamberth, the individual that must be suffering from little man syndrome. We'll talk about that and more as we discuss how our liberty here in Tennessee and every other state that is considering so-called school choice legislation, how it is being eroded by state governments convincing the people that they can sell us our liberty. So let's take a stand in the arena again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. Before we kick off this segment, folks, I'm going to encourage those Tennessee residents who are not already subscribed to my blog on libertyleadershipandlies.com to head over there now and look for the post titled Trans Publicans Needing a Primary Opponent. In that post, I've added a document containing the contact information for every trans publican in the Tennessee House and Senate that voted to force the great citizens of this volunteer state to double fund private and public education, despite our Constitution only granting them the authority to provide for public education. Some of these elected officials believe it is the role of government to force us all to acquiesce and grow the size and scope of government involvement in our lives. We're relying on a straw man argument, really just a fallacy, to push this possibly unconstitutional bill down our throats. They helped lame duck Governor Bill Lee sell the lie that parents did not have a choice in how their children were educated and that they need the government to provide them that choice. They helped sell the lie that the Education Freedom Act did not encroach on the autonomy of private education. Yet in a self-owned post on social media, they stated, and I'm quoting directly from the Tennessee House Republicans here, quote, any school or student that opts into school choice is held accountable and required to participate in year-end assessments, just like students in traditional public schools. Parents can also hire or fire the schools that work best for their child. End quote. Now, just what the heck does held accountable mean if not government control? And with only 50 or 51 counties in the state of Tennessee that have private schools, parents cannot hire or fire any private school if there aren't any available for them to send their children to. The holes in this liberty eroding legislation would make a block of Swiss cheese jealous. And there aren't any of those spineless, completely paid for shills willing to debate any conservative on this bill. Not on the House floor, and definitely not in their home districts. That is why every conservative Tennessean that had a representative or a senator in their district vote to pass this massive takeover of private education must face a conservative primary opponent in their next election cycle. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, folks. It is time for everyone that considers themselves a Republican to get off their collective behinds and work hard at finding a quality candidate to take on these trans publicans. And now, since 2025 is an odd number year, it also means that every county GOP has to hold their reorganization and elect new officers. Some counties have already held theirs, but most have not. I shared the schedule on my social media accounts and the webpage last Thursday. We must ensure every bona fide Republican in the county shows up at these events and regain control of the Republican Party at the local level as well. Sevier County is currently scheduled to hold their reorganization meeting on the 25th of March. The time and location have not been released yet, but once again, it is during the work week. That means it will be held around noon at the county courthouse so all of the usual suspects can make it there to continue their poop show for the next 2 years. When you have weak county Republican Party organizations, you get people like Jack Johnson and Randy McNally elected to our state Senate, allowing themselves to label themselves personally as Republicans. The same thing goes for the Tennessee House, where you have the grifter Cameron Sexton as Speaker of the House and little man syndrome sufferer William Lamberth running around bullying every representative because of his quote unquote leadership title of House Majority Leader. He kind of reminds me of the character in that movie Goodfellas that was played by Joe Pesci. I can just hear him or imagine him saying to an actual conservative representative, "What? Am I some sort of effing clown to you?" Now, what is little man syndrome, you may ask? Well, little man syndrome is a colloquial term often used to describe a set of behaviors attributed to men who are perceived as compensating for their short stature with an exaggerated display of toughness or assertiveness and aggression. It's almost like a Chihuahua dog, too, you know what I mean? I'm sure many of you have seen these little dogs chase off mountain lions and other larger animals. Some people believe they do that because in their minds, they picture themselves as being bigger and meaner than whatever animal they are facing. Now, as for me, I am not the tallest of men by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I'm quite often the shortest dude in nearly every gathering I'm a part of. I like to describe myself as submarine tall because my height made serving on submarines much easier than it did for taller people who would always bang their heads on pipes, valves, or other objects in the low overheads. But my lack of height does not, and did not, cause me to behave like a bully, though, unlike William Lambert. Others may know that little man syndrome is a concept closely related to the psychological term Napoleon complex. After a couple of years hearing about Lambert's behavior now, I do believe he suffers that either one of those, small man syndrome or Napoleon complex. But let's get back to the lurch, not a shift, but a lurch to the left by the General Assembly this past week. I was watching one of the committee sessions about the voucher scheme bill last week and witnessed a bit of an attempt at bullying one of the conservatives on the committee about his choice of words or his language describing the bill, and it was glorious to watch. The committee chair in this particular meeting tried berating one of the GOP senators that was actually pushing back on Lane Duck Lee's government takeover of private education by using the correct word, by the way, as we'll discuss here in just a second, using the correct word of voucher to describe the handouts of taxpayer money in this bill. The chairman kept insisting that this individual use the language in the bill by calling the handouts scholarships instead of voucher. Remember, folks, control the language, control the narrative, control the outcome. I was glad to see this particular senator push back on that, though. He continued to call these handouts what they really are, vouchers. So let's examine those two words, voucher and scholarship. First up, it's voucher. What is the purpose of a voucher? They are typically government issued or state funded programs designed to give parents the option to send their children to schools outside the public school system, often including private or charter schools. Now, how are vouchers funded? Well, they are funded by public money, meaning taxes paid by the citizens, where a portion of the state or local education budget is allocated to each student in the form of a voucher. As for the eligibility of vouchers, that criteria can vary, but often include income levels, residency, or specific educational needs. Sometimes vouchers are available to all students, but they're more commonly targeted towards low-income families or students in underperforming schools. That's not the case with the bill passed last week. These vouchers are only available to less than 2% of students in the state of Tennessee. Well, there are 51 counties, many of them rural, in Tennessee that do not have private schools, which means these counties would not have voucher eligible schools despite the trans-publican statements about statewide eligibility. That means they lied to the people to get support for this bill because 44 counties have private schools, and many of them will not qualify based upon criteria for eligibility that's contained in the bill. But let's stick with the 44 though. Only 46% of counties in the state have private schools that will accept less than 2% of the students eligible to receive these vouchers. That doesn't sound very universal to me, which is what they sold this bill as. Does it sound universal to you? Anyway, continuing with the term voucher. They are generally used to pay tuition at a private school or sometimes at a public school outside the student's district. It's not the case here, but they are less flexible in how they can be spent compared to scholarships. With regards to accountability of vouchers, there might be less direct accountability for how the voucher funds are spent by schools, though some programs require the schools to report on student performance, as in the case of this bill. Standardized testing is one of the government strings attached to these vouchers, which is subverting control over teaching and curriculums in these private schools that will accept the vouchers. Now let's compare that to scholarships, which the disingenuous trans publicans want us to believe they passed in this bill. Scholarships are awards designed to help students pay for education, whether it's at the primary, secondary, or higher education level, and can be used at a wide range of institutions, including colleges, universities, or vocational schools, not K through 12 schools. I want the audience to keep in mind how these devious legislators want to conflate Tennessee's Hope scholarships, funded by people's voluntary participation in the lottery system, with the voucher scheme they put into place. Hope scholarships pay for higher education, not primary or K through 12 education. That was something I missed in my interview with Representative Chris Todd a couple of months ago. His answer to my question on the school voucher bill should have triggered me to ask further questions at the time because he was setting up or telegraphing his position on the scheme. His position, which of course I'm quite disappointed in. We'll get to that easily debunked position in the next segment, though. As to funding of scholarships, there's a key difference in the funding mechanisms. Scholarships can come from various sources, including private organizations, corporations, foundations, educational institutions, or individuals. Scholarships, typically, with the exception like the Hope Scholarship, are not funded by government tax dollars for primary or secondary education, though some government scholarships exist for higher education, just as I mentioned the Hope one. Taxes are not voluntary. Paying for lottery tickets is completely voluntary. The eligibility criteria for scholarships are often diverse based upon merit, academic achievement, sports or arts, financial need, background, like something like first generation college students or specific ethnicities, or intended field of study. Some scholarships require applications and essays, while others might be automatic based on certain qualifications. Now, here, scholarships are often more flexible in how they can be used. They might cover tuition, books, housing, or other educational expenses. Okay, I'm going to pick this back up after this quick break before I go too long on this segment, though. Stay right there. I'll be right back. Okay, folks, picking up where I left off. Scholarship programs often have requirements for maintaining grades or other conditions to keep the scholarship, but they are requirements for the individual, not the school. If you put requirements on the school, such as these vouchers do, it is the government putting controls on the school. In summary, vouchers are more about giving, according to the devious out-of-state billionaire special interests and their bought and paid for politicians in the General Assembly. The vouchers are supposedly about choice within the K through 12 educational system, often aimed at promoting school choice and are funded through public resources, meaning taxes. For scholarships, though, which is what the usurpers of liberty in the General Assembly want us to believe that their vouchers are, scholarships are broader, aimed at supporting education at various levels with funds from diverse, private sources focusing on rewarding merit or aiding those in financial need. Both of them, vouchers and scholarships, aim to facilitate access to education, but operate under different principles, different funding mechanisms, and different regulatory frameworks. But in Tennessee, with only 44% of counties having private schools and only 2% of students eligible, what and whose access are the trans publicans trying to facilitate? Now we've compared the two words a bit. I find it hilarious when these mini tyrants and leadership sycophants try to push their word definition changes onto other people. That is the tactic of tyrants and communists, which is another example of the lurch to the left in our supposedly supermajority Republican legislators. I want to get back to what I mentioned about Representative Todd's answer to my question about the voucher bill a couple of months ago. That whole interview was done in episodes 168 and 169 back in September of last year. Go back and give it a listen. But as I recall, Representative Todd gave an answer back then about my question on vouchers, and And that answer is what many of the supporters of this atrocity are echoing today. He stated that the government already does spend taxpayer money on private sector services all the time. It is often quite necessary, and it's too late to change that. Now, I agree with that concept completely, folks. There are many things that the government spends taxpayer money on in the private sector, and that is because the government does not or cannot provide that good or service. The government contracts with and spends taxpayer money on infrastructure projects because the government is not in the business of building roads and buildings. The government provides law enforcement and firefighting services. And because of that, there's not a huge private sector market within our state and our nation for those same services. As it relates to education, though, the government already does provide that service. In fact, our state constitution mandates that the General Assembly set up and maintain a system of free public education. And since it provides that service, paid for already by the taxpayers, setting up a system or mechanism for providing funding for private education, it's not a constitutional function of our government. To do so would be monopolistic, controlling all aspects of education. It is, in my opinion, as well as many other legal scholars' opinions, that what the General Assembly just did with regards to primary education is unconstitutional. But they did it to pat themselves on the back and to fold under the pressure of special interest groups. Once again, though, we have set ourselves up to live and die by the decisions of the judicial branch of government because we allowed these people, the completely wrong type of people, to serve in elected office. They always end up eventually usurping our liberty for their own gain, be that access, power, or money. I was going to talk about or share with the audience some of the past statements of these trans publicans, along with their social media posts that they post to make a claim to the type of person they are or where they fall on the political spectrum. In many other statements and social media bios, they claim to be Christian conservatives, yet they legislate like godless communists. It would take up too much time to sift through and share all of their lies and nonsense on this program, but I want to encourage the audience to do a bit of their own research. Also, I want the audience to encourage others to do their own research as well. However, though, I will highlight a couple of these representatives here in East Tennessee that have lied to or ignored their constituents and gone against their wishes directly, all because some special interest told them to, paid them to. Now, the first one is State Representative Jeremy Faison. He has been discussed on this program before because he informed the last General Assembly's freshman representatives that their number one job was not fealty to the Constitution or even to follow their oath. He told them all that their number one job was to get reelected. So, that gives us kind of an inkling of what he is all about, right? Personal power. He doesn't represent any of the people here in Sevier County, but he does represent a neighboring county, Cott County, where I have a lot of friends. Anyway, his bio on X states that he's the Tennessee House Republican Caucus Chairman, House District 11 State Rep, Christian, husband, dad, small business owner with the hashtags of liberty and freedom and America in his bio. Yep, he's definitely a Christian. He's a Christian that just helped to put into place government control of many private Christian schools as it relates to testing and curriculum if they dare accept any taxpayer funded vouchers. There's a saying or quote that I forget who it can be attributed to, and it is this quote, don't expect to send your children off to Caesar and have them come back as Romans. That quote could be applied to government schools, but with this insertion of government control of private schools, it would now apply there as well. Anyway, Faison went on X in the lead up to the vote on this bill and stated that polling reported widespread support for the voucher scheme. Really now? Who conducted and paid for the poll? Well, the same people that wanted to impose this liberty robbing bill on the people of Tennessee. That's who. Many of his constituents across all social media asked him to produce the poll, the questions asked in the poll, along with the answers. A vast majority of the comments on his social media posts were in opposition to this bill. A vast majority, like 99 to 1, I believe. Yet he went and voted for this bill. Did any of his constituents get the answers they asked out of their representative? Of course not. Because commies and tyrants don't answer the people. They answer to whoever pays them the most money to accomplish job number one, get reelected. The next representative is closer to home and does represent some of my neighbors in Sevier County, but in District 17. That would be the ambulance chasing personal injury lawyer, Andrew Farmer. He was on record last year with residents of his district not supporting the voucher plan, but he did support and vote for this bill. His bio on X states that he is, quote, your voice from your house to the state house, unquote. His Facebook bio is bland. Both of those accounts have little to no interaction with his residents, nor does he meet with many of them in person. His district represents parts of Jefferson and Sevier County. Prior to the convening of the special session, though, the Jefferson County Republican Party put out an official statement objecting to the passage of the Education Freedom Act. Yet here was their Republican candidate going against their wishes. So much for being their voice, right? I do have to give props to the three other legislators that represent the people of Sevier County in the General Assembly for not voting for the passage of this bad piece of legislation. They would be State Senators Jesse Seal and Steve Sutherland. They were a no vote in the Senate, and State Representative Fred Ashley also voted no. I'm actually surprised by Jesse Seal's no vote. I mean, we talked about it before, because since it was the money that came from a pro-voucher group, the Club for Growth, that pushed him to a win in last year's primary. However, might be something behind that because I believe that leadership allowed Jesse to vote no because they knew they had enough yes votes to ensure passage. Politics is a dirty game, but it appears that it doesn't matter what political party's in power. Most of the time, the end result is the people's liberty that suffers the most. Tennessee isn't a blue state, folks, but here's the thing. It isn't a red state either. It's a green state. Money talks and liberty walks. I would like to let the audience know that I invited Representative Ashley on the program to congratulate him publicly for standing with his constituents on this issue. But I think we all know what his answer will be. It won't be a yes, and it won't be a no. What it will be is no answer at all. I also invited any member of the Republican caucus in Nashville who voted for this bill to come on this program to defend their vote. You know what? It'll be the same answer as Fred's, don't you think? I also invited a few of the legislators in the Republican caucus that oppose this bill, and they've expressed some interest in coming on the program. We'll have to see how that plays out, though. I'm going to pause right here before I come back in the closing segment to talk about a strange public meeting taking place next week, as well as to let the audience know about next week's guest on the podcast. So don't go away. I'll be right back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for this week. Be sure and check out the blog post listing the traitorous Republican usurpers of liberty in the General Assembly. Feel free to leave them a phone message or an email telling them exactly how you feel about them forcing us to double fund private and public education in the state. For those listeners outside of Tennessee, you must take a stand in the arena to ensure this does not happen where you live. If you're watching this on Rumble or YouTube, be sure to follow the show there and give this episode a thumbs up. If you're listening to audio only, please give the show a review on whatever platform that is. Before I get into the upcoming strange meeting, let me tell you about next week's guest. Her name is Nikki Truesdell. She is a second-generation homeschooler, mother to 5 children, and an advocate for homeschooling. She's known for her work in promoting relaxed and fun approaches to homeschool education, especially in history, which she believes can be taught with minimal cost or stress. Nikki blogs about books, freedom, history, quilts, and other related topics at nickitruesdale.com. That is NICKITRUESDEL.com. She is also a member of the Texas Home Educators Advisory Board and the Old Schoolhouse Homeschool Review crew. Additionally, she shares her insights on homeschooling, Christian parenting, and conservative issues through her blog posts and social media presence on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, X, and Pinterest. Nikki has written and published on these topics, offering resources, encouragement, and how to guides for homeschooling families. I'm looking forward to having her on the show because many of you longtime listeners know that it is my belief that in the area of education, homeschooling can save the Republic. Now, for the weird public meeting next week here in Sevier County. The Sevier County government has announced some sort of partnership with a group called Blue Zones. From what I could discover, the initial impetus behind Blue Zones popping up around the United States can be attributed to a Dan Bootner, who is a National Geographic Fellow and Explorer and is the one who coined the term Blue Zones after identifying areas around the world where people live significantly longer lives. His work began with an exploration for the National Geographic magazine, where he studied demographic and scientific data to locate these longevity hotspots. Butner's findings were published in his book series and popularized through various media, including a Netflix documentary. Now, this concept has gained traction in the U.S., where communities saw the potential benefits of adopting lifestyle habits observed in these blue zones, leading to the creation of Blue Zones Project. That's all well and good, but it is the partnerships behind the projects that have me concerned. Big money healthcare industry organizations, who did not really have the people's best interests at heart during the scamdemic, if you remember, are backers of this group. I'm also concerned with the county government prioritizing something like this here in Sevier County, where there are other areas where the expenditure of taxpayer money would benefit the immediate needs of the community. Anyway, this meeting is next week, and I'll let the audience know what I discover at the meeting. Anyway, I want to summarize this week's episode with this statement. Liberty is meant to be secured by government, never sold to us by the government, by forcing us to purchase it with our own tax money. Only tyrants and communists do that. This week's wisdom from God's word comes to us from the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 11, verses 13 through 16. For such boasters are false apostles, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is not strange if his ministers also disguise themselves as ministers of righteousness. Their end will match their deeds. Our General Assembly has successfully disguised themselves in the past as a Republican supermajority. Now, the Republican Party platform seeks to secure individual liberty, promote smaller government, and strictly follow the Constitution. Our Republican supermajority does the complete opposite. Last week, they revealed what they truly are. Maintaining liberty takes a constant fight through constant involvement by we the people. We cannot let our apathy let these people further erode our liberty. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.